Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing, Canto 11, Chapter 11. And we're beginning, but we won't finish, text number 5. And the Sanskrit begins ataha, which means thus. So this is a summary of the first 4 verses, what we're to understand from it. Thus, my dear Uddhava, in the same material body we find opposing characteristics, such as great happiness and misery. That is because both the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally liberated, as well as the conditioned soul, are within the body. I shall now speak to you about their different characteristics. The difference between the living entity and the jiva, and Paramatma. We're getting what's known from our acharyas, what's known as Sambandha Gyan. We heard already in the first 4 verses something about Maya Shakti, or Apara Prakriti, the inferior nature, and the different divisions of that inferior nature. We heard 3. There's different models of looking at what the inferior nature, how it can be analyzed, or its component parts. But Vidya, Avidya, and Pradhan. Pradhan meaning that feature of the Maya Shakti, or the external energy that provides bodies, gross and subtle, for living entities. So now we're hearing another Sambandha Gyan topic, because if it is this, and this is living entity and the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul, the distinction between them. Say it differently. Without having proper Sambandha Gyan, it's not possible to prosecute or carry out devotional service properly. You won't hit the target, what to speak of the bullseye. So there must be some fundamental understanding of what's what. Sambandha Gyan, the connection between all things and the source of all things. If you're going to be connected to the source of all things, you have to know what's what. Therefore, scriptures need it. It's not optional. So, here's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of this verse. O Uddhava, I shall now describe the difference between the embodied spirit soul, who possesses 2 contradictory natures of misery and happiness, and the eternally liberated Supreme Personality of Godhead. The BBT purport reads, in verse 36 of the previous chapter, Uddhava inquired about the different symptoms of liberated and conditioned life. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the characteristics of bondage and liberation may be understood in 2 divisions, as the difference between the ordinary conditioned soul and the eternally liberated personality of Godhead, or as the difference between conditioned and liberated living entities in the jiva category. The Lord will first explain the difference between the ordinary living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which may be understood as the difference between the controlled and the controller. Very clear. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, we just read the BBT purport, here's Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. similar messages. When the respective symptoms of the conditioned and liberated souls are carefully considered, there appears to be two contradictory natures. The conditional state is full of lamentation, and the liberated state is the platform of boundless happiness. Right? Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. The supersoul is the controller of all energies, and the spirit soul, being the marginal energy, is always controlled. Then comes Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, then his commentary, and that's it for text 5. In the previous chapter, Uddhava inquired from the Lord about the symptoms by which one can understand who is a conditioned soul and who is a liberated soul. In reply, the Lord explained that the characteristics of bondage and liberation may be understood in two divisions. As the difference between the ordinary conditioned soul and the eternally liberated personality of Godhead, or as the difference between the conditioned and liberated living entities in the Jiva category. This goes on, but what's being said here? Both the conditioned and liberated living entities are fundamentally being part and parcel of the Supreme Living Entity. They're liberated. They're pure. As the Supreme Pure is pure, the living entity, part and parcel, is pure. However, living entities may, because they're marginal, come under the influence of the external energy. And there's categories of the external energy, liberated and conditioned. If you want to understand the liberated, understand the personality of Godhead. And then you'll understand the liberated soul, what that's like. Or another way of doing this is, if you understand the quality of the liberated soul distinct from the conditioned soul, you'll understand about the personality of Godhead. So there's two ways of approaching those distinctions of conditioned and liberated. The Vedas confirm that the super soul is untouched by material contamination. The difference between the spirit soul and the super soul will be described in the following verses. The conditioned soul is full of lamentation, whereas the super soul is full of bliss. They are both situated in the same body, but one of them is fully independent and the other is completely dependent on the independent Lord. Then here's actually Vishwanath's commentary. Uddhava asked about the qualities of the liberated jiva, 11:10:36. We hear statements like, quote, the jiva is in bondage and that jiva is liberated, which is a contradiction. Or the jiva is in bondage and the Paramatma is liberated. Or that Atma is without sin. First, hear about the difference between the jiva and Paramatma. This is explained in 1.5 verses. Two possessors of qualities with opposite natures. Two possessors of qualities with opposite natures. Viruddha Dharmino. Viruddha Dharmino, that's opposite natures. Namely, lamentation and bliss are situated in one body as the controller and the controlled. Let's go back. This reference is mentioned twice so far in just with this verse purport. Uddhava, very clearly, that the question that he raises is, please explain, we sometimes hear this statement that living entities are eternally conditioned and the same living entity is eternally liberated, so that's a contradiction. Please explain. That was the launching point for this discussion, this chapter so far. So it's making reference to it again, and there's, I'll say it again because he said it at the beginning, there's something over here and there's something over there. Something over here says, Krishna says, Uddhava, that the very question that you're asking is misleading. Why? Because the living entity is pure. The living entity isn't become liberated because the living entity is pure, and that means always liberated. I'll go over here. Like the Supreme Lord is always liberated. Living entity is my part and parcel. She's always pure. So when you talk about, now over on this side, conditioned and liberated, or vidya and avidya potency, that's Maya Shakti. That's a designation covering the living entity that's not the living entity. Living entities don't become pure. They're pure. But covered, yes. So removing the covering, then it's appropriate, you can say, becoming liberated. But it's still under one of the potencies of the Supreme Lord. What all of that is about is the real state of purity of the soul is connected to the Supreme Soul in devotion. All of this is pointing to bhakti. You with me? There's vidya potency. There are followers of the Vedas that are really interested in knowledge. Gyanis. They, at best, come into the category of the vidya potency. But the vidya potency is over here. That's one of the Maya Shakti potencies. But they, having not yet connected with bhakti, they can fall down. The vidya potency can undergo some change, like the weather in Boston. Undergo some change, and then the next thing, one time it's sunny, and the next time it's lightning and torrential rain, and then now it's sunny again. So vidya potency, avidya potency, and we're subject to whatever is going on out there. But that's not really us. So living entities are pure. So the vidya potency is just one of Maya Shakti's potencies. Rain and sunshine kind of thing. If you really want to understand the soul, you have to understand the Supreme Soul. And then the soul in its pure condition, not covered or designated situation, is like the Supreme Soul. Important. This is opening the door for bhakti. Unobstructed bhakti. Let's say it the other way. Supposing you're covered. Some of us are covered. I think we're all covered. And is bhakti possible if you're covered? Well, bhakti that's not pure is possible. Mixed bhakti. Mixed by the modes. That's in Kapila's teachings in the 3rd canto. We're already in canto 11. So, yes, bhakti that's mixed with the modes is possible, but bhakti, that's the consciousness of the living entity. Bhakti is pure and the soul is pure. But there can be clouds in the sky and, thunderstorm, and this morning there was lightning and, early in the morning. Now it's nice. So, those clouds in the sky are created by the sun. And when the clouds are removed, then there's the sun. So the connect, the idea is through bhakti to connect with the Supreme Soul without obstruction. So bhakti plus vidya, or bhakti, a subset of bhakti is vidya. With those engaged in bhakti, then one is lifted by the transcendental vidya potency that's connected to bhakti, or supportive of bhakti, or is helpful to bhakti. But vidya alone is not yet fully pure. You can become liberated, and then there's a storm again. So the goal is to get to unmixed bhakti. That's where this whole discussion is going. So many chapters, going slowly, lots of detail, sometimes a little puzzling, but that's where the train is going. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some nice illustrations. Ooh. Thus, my dear Uddhava, in the same material body we find opposing characteristics such as great happiness, that's the guy on the left, and misery, that's the one on the right. That is because both the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally liberated, as well as the conditioned soul, are within the body. I shall now speak to you about their different characteristics. Okay, so let's hear about their different characteristics. This is the two birds in the tree. It's from the Upanishads, and it's here in the Bhagavatam. Here's text number 6. By chance, two birds have made a nest together in the same tree. It's a metaphor. The two birds are friends and are of a similar nature. One of them, however, is eating the fruits of the tree, whereas the other, who does not eat the fruits, is in a superior position due to his potency. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. There are two birds, the living entity and the super soul, who live together in a nest, or the heart, of a tree, the material body. They are similar in nature, both being spiritual, and they are inseparable friends. One bird, the living entity, enjoys the fruits of the tree, whereas the other, the super soul, does not partake of the fruit because he is in a superior position on account of his potency. And long BBT purport. The example of two birds in the same tree is given to illustrate the presence within the heart of the material body of both the individual soul and the super soul, the personality of Godhead. Just as a bird makes a nest in a tree, the living entity sits within the heart. The example is appropriate because the bird is always distinct from the tree. Similarly, both the individual soul and the super soul are distinct entities, separate from the temporary material body. The word balena indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by his own internal potency, which consists of eternality, omniscience, and bliss, as indicated by the word bhu-yan, or having superior existence. The Supreme Lord is always in a superior position, whereas the living entity is sometimes in illusion and sometimes enlightened. The word balena indicates that the Lord is never in darkness or ignorance, but is always full in his perfect blissful consciousness. Paragraph. Thus the Lord is nirana, or uninterested in the bitter fruits of material activities, whereas the ordinary conditioned soul busily consumes such bitter fruits, thinking them to be sweet. Ultimately, the fruit of all material endeavor is death. Yet, the living entity foolishly thinks material things will bring him pleasure. The word sakayao, or two friends, is also significant. Our real friend is Lord Krishna, who is situated within our heart. Only He knows our actual needs, and only He can give us real happiness. Paragraph. Lord Krishna is so kind that He patiently sits in the heart, trying to guide the conditioned soul back home, back to Godhead. Certainly no material friend would remain with his foolish companion for millions of years, especially if his companion were to ignore him or even curse him. But Lord Krishna is such a faithful, loving friend that He accompanies even the most demoniac living entity and is also in the heart of the insect, pig, and dog. That is because Lord Krishna is supremely Krishna conscious and sees every living entity as part and parcel of Himself. Every living being should give up the bitter fruits of the tree of material existence. One should turn one's face to the Lord within the heart and revive one's eternal, loving relationship with one's real friend, Lord Krishna. The word sadrishao, or of similar nature, indicates that both the living entity and the personality Godhead are conscious entities. As part and parcel of the Lord, we share the Lord's nature, but in infinitesimal quantity. Thus, the Lord and the living entity are sadrishao. A similar statement is found in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, celebrated verse that we hear about often. It's quoted in Bhagavad Gita. It starts, Dva Saparna, Sayuja, Sakaya, etc. There are two birds in one tree. One of them is eating the fruits of the tree, while the other is witnessing the actions. The witness is the Lord, and the fruit eater is the living entity. Lots of pages to go. I think I'll have to stop soon. Okay, here's same idea, because this is a well-known analogy, two birds in a tree. So there's lots of commentary about it. This is Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. Just as a bird is separate from the tree he sits in, the spirit soul and the super soul are distinct from the material body, which is compared to a tree. Because both of them are of the same spiritual quality, they are naturally related as friends. While residing within the tree, one of them enjoys the fruits of that tree, whereas the other one simply witnesses his friend's activities. The tree of material existence has its roots upwards and its branches down, as described in Bhagavad Gita 15:1. You know the verse. The Supreme Personality Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas." Paragraph. Two birds live in this imperishable banyan tree. One of them is a living entity who engages in eating the fruits of the tree, and the other is a super soul who does not eat the fruit, but remains always self-satisfied. It is also stated in the Vedas, from Shvetashvatara Upanishad again, Dva Suparna, Sayuja, etc. Two companion birds sit together in the shelter of the same pipala tree. One of them is relishing the taste of the tree's berries, while the other refrains from eating and instead watches over his friend. Then there's Vishwanath's commentary. I think what I'm going to do, because, well, there's slight difference. I'll read. As birds are different from the tree, the jiva and paramatma are different from the body. They are similar because both are conscious entities. They are friends because they work together. There's no reason for them being together in the tree, since one is attached to making a nest and eating the fruit, while the other is not attached to making a nest or eating fruit. Vriksha or tree means, quote, that which is cut, vrishate, by maya, unquote. That which is cut, vriksha, that which is cut by maya. It refers to the body, which is destroyed by maya. Shruti says, Urdhva mulam avak shakha vriksha yo veda samprati. Or, one who knows this tree with its roots upward and branches downward becomes liberated. Same as what's in Bhagavad Gita. No surprise. Smriti also says, from Bhagavad Gita, here's the Bhagavad Urdhvam Mulam Adha Shakham Ashvatam Prahur Avyayam. Or, translation, they say that this world is an indestructible pipala tree with root upward and branches downward. The Ashvat sometimes is translated as a pipala, sometimes as banyan. In this tree or body, there's a nest or house, the heart, and the body has been made out of attachment and detachment. Of the two, the jiva enjoys the fruits of karma produced by the body. Paramatma, however, does not eat, but is satisfied with his own bliss on the strength of his jnana shakti. Shruti says, again, this Mundaka Upanishad, Dvasuparna Sayujas Sakaya, the two birds metaphor. Okay, so now we're going to 10th Canto, Chapter 2. 10th Canto, Chapter 2 is the demigods offering prayers to Krishna in the womb, while Devaki is in the prison house of Kamsa. That's 10th Canto, Chapter 2. The commentary reads, the body, that's the total body, and the individual body are of the same composition, may figuratively be called the original tree. From this tree, which fully depends on the ground of material nature, comes two kinds of fruit, namely, enjoyment and suffering. The cause of the tree forming its three roots is association with the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, ignorance. The fruit of bodily happiness has four tastes: religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, which are experienced through five senses for acquiring knowledge in the midst of six circumstances, namely, lamentation, illusion, old age, death, hunger, and thirst. Not a nice list. The 7 layers of bark covering the tree are skin, blood, muscle, fat, bone, marrow, and semen. And the 8 branches of the tree are the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements: earth, water, fire, air, etc. The tree of the body has 9 hollows: eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth, rectum, and genitals, and 10 leaves, which are the 10 airs passing through the body. In this tree of the body, there are 2 birds: the individual soul and the supreme soul. Paragraph. A general description simply indicates the proprietors of the body. It's like simplifying everything. 2 birds. They're described in more detail later. This verse: of the 2 birds, 1 bird eats the tree's fruits. The jiva and Paramatma are not limbs of the tree. They are beyond the material realm, since they exist from the first, or from the beginning, like a stream with continuity. So they exist even before the body exists. They exist first, then comes the body, and they continue to exist for the duration of the body and after the body. They're the proprietors. The tree is described as Adi Vriksha because time at all times attacks it. Remember that it cuts or destroys. So the body is the tree in which the 2 birds are situated, and the etymology of Vriksha is time destroys it. Thus, tree, Vriksha. Its fruits are happiness and distress, with 4 tastes. It has 8 branches. The verse is explained according to Sridhar Swami. So all that 8 and 6 and all those things, that's Sridhar Swami's commentary, drilling down on what the tree is made up of. It's 8 kinds of bark and so forth. One more. We're done. This is from Canto 2, Chapter 6. This verse is being referred to. Here's text 18. Canto 2, 6, 18. O Brahmana, he is the Lord of spiritual bliss beyond material existence because he surpasses material happiness. The power of the Supreme Lord is unlimited. Commentary. The Supreme Lord is the Lord of bliss, the enjoyer and the giver of enjoyment. The nectar of Svarga is excluded from the meaning by saying that the Amrita is devoid of fear of samsara. So in the heavenly planets, they perish and they have fear because they know. Fear of death. It's temporary. That was discussed in the previous chapter, 10. The recommendation from Krishna to Uddhava is don't aspire for it. The Vedas have means to reach heaven. Don't go for it. Because it's the same situation, just a different variety, different brand of the same thing. So don't. Why is he the Lord of Amrita? Answer. He surpasses material happiness, which ends in death. In partaking of Amrita, there's no chewing the chewed. If he sometimes chews it, then he does so without attachment. Thus, as Antaryami, he chews. Quote, Aham hi sarvayagyanam bhokta cha prabhur eva cha. I am the enjoyer and the master of all sacrifices. Krishna is the enjoyer of sacrifices. He's the bhokta. But without attachment. He's doing so for the benefit of those who are doing the yagyas, to help lift them. So he accepts. but not in the attachment mode. Though he is sometimes designated as the enjoyer, he surpasses all material enjoyment. Anam. Or, quoted in this verse, one of the two birds in the tree, one of the two eats the fruit of the pipala tree, and the other, though he does not eat, remains strong. Unquote. Niranaha means that he is not attached at all to material enjoyment. This verse explains the Purusha Sukta verse, quote, he is the master of Amrita who surpasses material enjoyment. The reason is given. The glory of the Supreme Lord is unlimited, Duratyaya. This explains the meaning of the Purusha Sukta line, Etavan asya mahimato yajyam cha purushaha. Such are the powers of the Supreme Person. Okay, so as promised, we're getting a picture of some of the distinctions between the Jiva and the Paramatma. There's similarities, there's friendship, there's consciousness, there's life force, and so on. But there's a distinction. And so enjoying the fruits is one of those distinctions. Now, a liberated soul doesn't. They engage in activities without the mood of enjoyment. I'll just share something because it just happened yesterday. In China, because as you saw yesterday, I interact with the Chinese devotees. So they're in the process of creating Bhakti Shastri curriculum for the Chinese people. And one of the rules that they're to follow is there's an acronym, KCCC, Krishna Consciousness with Chinese Characteristics. Krishna Consciousness with Chinese Characteristics. Here's a little history. There's a very nice devotee who did a ton of research and presented a half an hour presentation, PowerPoint presentation on the history of religion in China, based upon, history texts in Chinese, and going back to, before Christ and this dynasty, that dynasty, and what was going on in China. So there was a period of time in Chinese history where from India, Brahmanism or Vedic culture was being preached. Their names are given, and there was some influence, and they show, in carvings, some deities of this one, that one, the other one, Ganesh, and so forth. And around the same time, there was an Italian who went to China and taught Christianity. And shortly after that, there was some Buddhist. So two remained, and one faded. The one that faded was Brahmanism, because, they were very rigid. It was too Indian. It didn't match Chinese characteristics. So it grew, and then it receded. So there's archaeological evidence that it was there in temples and like carvings and things like that. Disappeared. But Buddhism lasted. because they did things that adapted to Chinese characteristics. And one example was ancestor worship, because that's part of Chinese culture. Buddhism doesn't even believe in the soul, so what's the ancestor worship? But they adopted it. And that's just one example of, it's still around. So, with that sense of religion in the history of China, the devotees went to Vrindavan and Mayapur and attended the Bhakti Shastri course, and they were told, when you go back to Russia or South America or wherever you came from, you're going to have to modify the essence to make it suited for the country that you're from, the culture and the country and the language you're from. So they're undergoing this procedure of making Bhakti Shastri curriculum with Chinese characteristics, not changing the philosophy. So they have to be, qualified Brahmins to be able to do that. So just yesterday, there was one of the devotees working on the curriculum for Bhakti Shastri with Chinese characteristics. They're asking about what are the principal yoga systems in Bhagavad Gita, because sometimes we hear 4 and sometimes we hear 3. The first 6 chapters, Karma Yoga. The middle 6 chapters, Bhakti. The final 6 chapters, Gyan. Now, it's not that there's nothing else in there but those 3, but there's 3 main branches of the yoga system within Bhagavad Gita. And then put that on hold, and sometimes we hear 4. Karma, Gyan, Yoga, and Bhakti. You with me? So, the Ashtanga Yoga system is chapter 6. So does that mean that the Ashtanga Yoga practitioners, they don't know, they're not into Karma Yoga? And the answer that I provided is, it's not just they do meditation. They do other things. They eat. And they have lives besides their meditation life. So they need to know detached work. Minus bhakti, yes. But they need, so the way the Prabhupada has presented in his Bhaktivedanta purports, bhakti is there from the get-go. He's laced bhakti because that's the goal. Although the emphasis may be some part or one of the steps on the yoga ladder, but Prabhupada, in many cases, includes bhakti from the get-go. But not everybody is, bhaktas. So, like the Vedas, as a desire tree, it provides everything for everybody, whether you're a bhakta or you're not. So this, similarly, this is giving knowledge and detachment, and then, more confidential knowledge about the soul, and then more than that is the Supreme Soul, and the distinction. Where the train is going is bhakti, the relationship between the soul and the Supreme Soul, while acting with detachment for the temporary, but still acting with detachment. So like the super soul, back to the context of our discussion, the super soul is within the body, not partaking of the fruits of happiness and distress. Instead, it's, his own nature, his own Shakti, Satchidananda. He is relishing Ananda. He's relishing Ananda when the living entity is experiencing this illusion. How is that? Well, he's helping the living entity regain without interfering with their free will. He's a loving friend of the same nature as the soul. He wants. And even the living entity is calling him bad things. He's dead. God is dead. Or, God has no form or something. He has no qualities. He still remains a friend. without interfering with free will. That's tough. Like, you think about those of you that are parents. You know, there's another living entity in your family, and they've got free will, and you're like super soul, or trying to be, or at least being, providing and guiding, but not interfering. And then you have a loving relationship, allowing that the living entity is going to make choices, and sometimes it's not in the best interest. And so, but you continue to guide. You can continue to have a loving affection. It's not a liberated parent would be like that, perfect. And then, the conditioned living entity can be rebellious or affectionate. There's free will choices in those directions also. And compatibility is where the goal is harmonious. That's human life. The higher stage of human life is leading towards self-realization, which is what we're doing right now. So let's open the curtain. Check out the curtain's opening. We're going to go to text number 6, which reads, "By chance, 2 birds have made a nest together in the same tree. The 2 birds are friends and are of a similar nature. One of them, however, is eating the fruits of the tree, whereas the other, who does not eat the fruits, is in a superior position due to his potency." So when the enjoying bird becomes Krishna conscious, he still does activities without the mood of being the enjoyer. That's this Ashtanga yogi knows how to live their life without attachment to the fruits. There's interacting with Prakriti, but not in the mood of enjoyment. And then they do their meditation, which strengthens their that position or that understanding. And then they go back to what they have to do with their body and their mind to live in this world. So the nice example was, similarly, Krishna is the enjoyer of sacrifices, but he does it. That enjoyment is not with attachment, it's for the welfare of the living entity that's making the sacrifice. So similarly, that's parenting. Or it's any relationship, a friend, where you have a friend, and it's with affection that you extend yourself to the friend, without attachment. Not easy. But that's it. That's higher consciousness life. We have this nice model. Here's one more. Check it out. That little skinny guy, that's us, and then there's Paramatma within the same heart. The example of 2 birds in the same tree is given to illustrate the presence within the heart of the material body of both the individual and the individual soul and the super soul, the personality of Godhead. Just as a bird makes a nest in a tree, the living entity, it sits within the heart. The example is appropriate because the bird is always distinct from the tree. Similarly, both the individual soul and the super soul are distinct entities separate from the temporary material body. And one more. The word Valena indicates that the Lord is never in darkness or ignorance, but He is always full in His perfect, blissful consciousness. Nice illustration. There's some more, but we'll cover them tomorrow because we're going to continue with verse 6 before we go on to verse 7. Okay, lots of discussion, lots of talking, and it's already 8:26. Let's see if there's some questions. Way in the back.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So the question was, it seems like the living entity, the bird, I mean to say the free will seems to be like a untamed tiger, so to speak. And what are the ways that one can tame it, not from personal standpoint, but someone whom they know, when there is a long distance into play?
When there's a what in play?
Long distance, like they're not in proximity and
They're remote.
they're remote, yeah.
You do remote things, that same thing that you would do proximate. It's not going to be the same because it's remote rather than proximate. So the effect will not be the same, but you do the same things. Other than sharing prasadam, the other things are the same. That's what you do. Radha.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. I have 3 questions. How do you stop yourself?
Have I what?
How do you stop yourself when you are in mixed bhakti?
What do you think?
Because when we're doing mixed bhakti, it seems like we don't know that we're doing it.
Oh, yes. I mean, you don't know as fully as someone who's in Shuddha Bhakti knows, but you know. Don't you know? Yes, you do. Now, you don't know as much as somebody that's in higher Krishna consciousness will know, but you know. So, when the light is dim, you can't see as clearly as when the light is bright, but you can still see. Yeah. What else?
So my second question is, you were talking about some species are very low.
Yeah.
But isn't it an offense to see
Isn't it what?
Isn't it an offense to say that species are low?
No.
Because then we're...
It's not judgment, it's knowledge. They're distinct. Discernment is not judgment. Judgment is not discernment.
Because it feels like to me that we're saying, hey, humans are better.
No, that's judgment. That's an attitude. To say what's what is not judgment. It's in Bhagavad Gita. There's this mode, that mode, the other mode, and this the symptoms of these modes. It's not judgment, it's knowledge. Now, if you start looking down your nose and say, you're down there, Prabhu, then that's judgment. So we don't shut off the discriminating factor of the intelligence. We use it in a way that then we can know what's appropriate for this situation or that person or something to help them at least to understand with knowledge. Then there's detachment. Let's say somebody says something hurtful. Where's that coming from? It's coming from the mode of ignorance. Just like you remember from yesterday evening. those who are harsh in their dealings, they die in a painful way. It's not wishing you're going to get yours because you're harsh, but it's just that's the outcome. So you can know that you want what you want to you want to elevate. So when somebody says or does something that's harsh, you wish them well. I mean, if consciousness is high, that's what you do. Because they're suffering and they'll suffer more. And you don't wish that for them. So discernment isn't judgment.
But shouldn't we treat all animals and humans equal?
Why?
They all have Krishna in them?
Well, they all have Krishna in them, yes. And they're covered by gross and subtle bodies in a different way due to past activities. So you have respect, but you don't treat them equally. You don't go pet a tiger or embrace the tiger. People go feed the bears in Yellowstone Park and they end up getting eaten up by the bears. So, we have interactions differently. Knowing soul and super soul are inside, and it's best for them and for me if I keep a little distance. And same with people. Some people are really, violent, so we don't go hug them. Or, our behavior is appropriate for their covering.
And what about pets, like dogs? Because I end up
Yeah, we had the dog conversations a couple of times.
But I'm still not clear why I don't want a pet.
Huh?
I'm still not clear why we don't have pets.
Well, who was it? No, it was another devotee. Was asking, they read something from somewhere, and it speaks of dogs being, there's an adjective that's used, something like degraded or something like that, and they wanted to know why does it speak like that. Right in the verse it says, because they have no regard for others. They have a master. So the redeeming quality of a dog is, generally, there's exception, is being faithful to the master. Now there's stories of dogs eating babies and things like that, but that's their redeeming quality. Commonly, they're faithful to the master. But they're, those that are of their other species, they're not, it's low class. Woof, woof, woof. Rawr, 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 rawr. So that's one of the, for those who want to live their life, are living their life, or want to live their life with maintaining standards of purity and cleanliness, that's a major reason why keeping such pets is not advisable. Find ways to extend affection to other living beings besides, one that's not clean. It's kind of like, the discussion the other day about friends that are good friends. And you think they're good friends, and after some time you realize, whoops. So, it's not easy finding good friends. But the idea of making choices, free will choices, is that which is going to elevate consciousness. That's the principle. And if cleanliness is being compromised, that may not be a good choice. Now, with a friend, you can encourage and even train a friend to be clean. It's pretty hard to train a dog to be clean because they're not clean. In many ways. It's not, to blame them. It's just that goes along with the species. They wag their tails, they bark, and they chew on bones. They do what you do when you have a body like that. And they shed fur and stuff like that. Now, I've noticed it's a growing fad. All the other kids are doing it. Let's get a dog. And so they get a dog. And, one of the good things for people that have dogs is they go outside and walk. Because otherwise their dog is going to poop in the house. So people get their exercise by walking their dog. And it's all over the place. It's very trendy. That's my observation, more so than before. But that's anyway. The discrimination for one who wants the goal of life to be reached. It's something that where we put a pause on. There may be some reason. I know some devotee families, for this reason, that reason, they have a pet in the house. But it's not, it's a compromise that I question. There must be other ways to achieve whatever is supposed to be achieved by having a pet. That's my personal opinion. And not like want to contradict somebody that doesn't. Next.
This is my last question.
Yeah.
So don't the demigods drink the immortality nectar? So how can they die? Because
it's immortality in that sense is much longer than we're used to. It's not what real immortality is. They have long life, and it assists them in having a long life, and therefore it's called Amrita. But it's not, in the absolute sense, not like the personality of Godhead's Amrita. Someone else in the room? Yeah, back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Soul is pure and individual soul also. Then why it came illusion? It went illusion stage. When we were along with Krishna, that time we were very pure.
Okay, then, this is the fall of the jiva question, yes? That's
yeah. How it fallen?
I'll keep it short. The Vedas are silent. The Vedas speak voluminously about how to get out. The Vedas are silent. So the notion, the very question itself is a misleading question. The question itself that you just asked is in time, once upon a time. We're in this nice place, some time passed, and we pulled on our chin and thought, you know what? I want to enjoy separately. And then, boop, here we are in this material world, and we're struggling. That's an event in time, but it's an anadi event. Since time immemorial. So the question itself is misleading. But the how is silent, other than misuse of free will. I'll say one more thing. It's a question that doesn't generally get resolved for the mind, because the mind is a binary processor. It just doesn't fit the binary processor. But events usually have a cause, an external cause, that brings about a result, an effect. So your question is, what's the cause to bring about the effect? And the answer is misuse of free will. Now, why misuse free will? There's got to be a cause for misuse of free will, right? No. It's intrinsic to the soul. What? Yes, it's intrinsic to the soul. The soul is tatastha, and the material analysis would be, what's the cause of proper, what's the cause of improper exercise of free will? Something outside of ourselves. There's not something outside of ourselves, it's within ourselves. I'm not going to go with it further. It goes around and around and around and around and around and around. What Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 is, you won't understand until you become freed from the material conditioning, then you'll understand. So focus on becoming freed from material conditioning. The Vedas, once again, the Vedas are silent on how, other than misuse of free will. And then we want to put that misuse of free will within time. It is not within time. There's no external cause. It's the marginal position of the living entity with free will. We can turn this way, we can turn that way.
Right.
We're marginal. Next, in the back.
Hi Krishna Maharaj, thank you. I think you answered the question. Maybe this might
Okay,
be
great.
repetitive.
Great.
But let me confirm.
Go ahead. Let's confirm.
Thank you, Maharaj. So in this analogy, like of a tree, the soul and the super soul sitting on the tree, and the soul is trying to enjoy the fruits of the tree. So connecting that to that verse, like the prakriti kriyamanani, the acting, why the soul has to accrue the karma? Like if the nature is doing everything, action, it's the free will. It's the tendency to enjoy separate from the God.
That brings us, that very misuse of free will brings us into the covered by Maya Shakti condition. Conversely, if the living entity, free will specific and with descending mercy to boot, to augment or supplement that free will choice, then the mercy of Krishna comes and there's no karma. That's karma-free life. So let's do it again. Karma comes as a result of misuse of free will. I want to enjoy independently. Karma comes. The covering comes and the whole shebang. And the stage of liberation is, I don't want that. Are you sure you don't want that? I'm sure I don't want that. What about testing this, that and the other? I want my relationship with Krishna. Then there's no karma. There's activity without bondage. That's liberation. Activity without bondage. Karma-free life. Clear?
Yeah. So in whatever the activities that we do, like we need to, as referring to yesterday's class, like we need to act for the pleasure of the Lord.
You got it. That's bhakti. The thing is, we're distracted.
Marginal because of.
Yeah. We've misused our free will a whole bunch. And that the tendency, really strong tendency. And behind that tendency, there's an attitude. And that's what we talked about at the Festival of Holy Name, this indifference. That when it grows, it becomes rejection. but it starts with indifference. Yeah. Indifference. Okay. Next, let's go. Let's something on in the room or online. Okay.
How to control the free will? Won't
How
the
to
devotional-
control free will?
won't the
Exercise it
devotional
properly.
practice-
It's in your hand, and you have to exercise it properly. You have to know whether to turn left or right. You have to know what's Krishna and what's not Krishna, and you choose Krishna. And you get strength to choose Krishna instead of not Krishna through descending mercy. So it's both your effort, willing effort, and descending mercy. Two things. How to? Two things.
Two things is one is
Effort and mercy.
down.
Effort and mercy. Supposing you don't know what's what. You don't know what's what. You're going to make some choices. So to exercise it properly, you have to know what's what, and you choose, what's favorable to Krishna. And even deciding to choose what's favorable to Krishna, you're going to need mercy, because there's this other tendency going on. The conditioned tendency, the covered tendency, the avidya tendency. Back to Radha's question, how do we know we got, the right course of choice?
Reason to control the free will going in the wrong direction is the association.
Well, yeah, of course. But yeah, that's the simple. The how-to question is simple. Sadhu Sangha. Then you unpack it. You can be in association of devotees and be out to lunch. So there's something at the heart level, something at the intelligence level, something at the mind level, something at the behavior level. But that's the key. Like bhakti begins by sadhu sangha, and bhakti continues by sadhu sangha, and bhakti in the mature stages with sadhu sangha. Properly, accepted. Okay, let's go on to our online questions. Let's go to our online questions. Let's go to our online questions. Our poor online people feeling neglected. Let's go.
So first question is from Govinda Mohini Mataji. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have been contemplating if I am fully practicing Yuga Dharma congregational chanting. I am chanting every day but not necessarily congregational part. Is that something I need to strive to do every day as well?
Depends on your lifestyle and depends on your inclinations. So it's something you're missing out if you don't have congregational chanting every day.
Okay. That is to try to do kirtan with the family every day to fully
Speak slower.
That is to try to do kirtan with the family every day to fully practice Yuga Dharma every day.
Fantastic. Very, very practical.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. If our soul, this is from Giridhar Vutikota, if our soul is having association with the super soul, with the two birds analogy, generally good association influences to cultivate good behavior. Is there any interactions between the soul and the super soul?
When there's bhakti, there's interaction. Otherwise, it's remote. Remote means super soul is prompting and you're ignoring. Or super soul is giving intelligence how to, complete your task in the office. Or the super soul is giving intelligence to the thief how to steal. Or, super soul is interacting where it's not conscious, but is happening. Next.
That's all.
That's it? Okay, let's hear it.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So, how exactly can someone get
How exactly what?
bhakti, and how do they know they are on the path of bhakti?
You get bhakti from one who has bhakti. That's what our scriptures teach. And how do you know you got it? You know, you follow the bhakti teachings. You apply the bhakti teachings in your practical life. And you know, that's gradual. We don't go from 0 to 10. We go incrementally, but that's how we know we got it. We're applying. You mold your life in such a way that the teachings of bhakti are within your daily life behavior or lifestyle.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question stemming from that. So when you spoke about free will and practicing it and saying do the way where Krishna is, how do you know which of those marginal choices is the one where Krishna is?
Well, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. You've heard that before, right? Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Those are our 3 reference points or authorities by which we can understand anything, including your question. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. That's our pramana, our means of knowing.
Okay. Right, thank you.
You have something? Mataji, you were looking like you have something, no? No, okay. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.